Just always got to make sure. All right, it's working. All right, so with me today, we've got Brandon Copeland. And I won't make the mistake this time of not doing intros. So I've done my research on Brando. And just to throw out some stats on who we're going to be talking to today, Brando's had 108 World Triathlon starts, 9 wins, 19 podiums. He's been on the circuit now for over 10 years, started in 2014, and he's a Commonwealth Games athlete. He's been in the elite space for a long time now. We're going to learn a lot about what it takes to be an elite athlete and the pathways on how you can get there, and we'll find out a bit from Brando today. So welcome, Brando. How you going?
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm going good. It's a bit muggy now come this time of year, but are you still in Gold Coast at the moment? Are you away for holidays or?
Yeah, still on the Gold Coast. I'm here until Boxing Day, then I'll head over to Perth for 10 days with my partner, so that'll be good. Yeah. Bit of a break from the humidity. Still hot over there, but no, it'll be nice. Yeah,
nice one, mate. Well, we sort of chatted about it earlier, and last week I had a chat with the Schofield boys, and I just sort of thought I'd go around the traps and see who wants to have a chat, and give some real life examples on, how an Australian athlete comes to, I guess, work their way up and be in the elite ranks of triathlon, mainly obviously in that sort of short course system. Obviously there's other pathway options you can go down. Just find out about their journey, how they made it happen for themselves, any tips and advice for, say, if you could have given young Brando some tips and advice on what to do early in the piece, and that other athletes who are going to watch this can take away. But maybe, mate, do you want to sort of start sort of somewhere near the beginning? How you got into triathlon, and what maybe your club environment looked like, who your coaches were, and sort of how things were at the beginning?
Sounds good, mate. So I think I was probably on the later side to pick up tri. I started when I was, just before I turned 16. Just was doing a bit of surf club stuff, bit of swimming, bit of soccer, but nothing elite by any means, just sort of doing a bit here and there, having fun, enjoying it. When the Kingy Tri was on, and I grew up in Kingscliff, so that was a local race. Me and a few of my mates decided to do a team. I think I did the swim leg there. It was like the Enticer team race. I did a 300-meter swim, and that might have been March, and there was another race in November or something. And I was basically like, okay, that looks cool. I'll try and do the whole thing next time. So 6 months rolled around. I hadn't gotten into the sport as such. I did it on a mountain bike with shoes, didn't have elastic laces. So my feet were hanging out of my shoes the whole bike leg. Like, I couldn't get my shoes on. I was rattled. It was terrible, but somehow it was enough to get me hooked. I still managed to enjoy it. I wouldn't have done any good, I don't think, in that race, the Enticer, but enjoyed it. And from there, basically, I set about starting triathlon, getting a road bike, all those things that we all go through, and progressed from there. A few months later, I started working with my first coach, Pete McKenzie. And he was like awesome. He really showed me how to train, taught me a lot about the sport. Went from having no idea what I was doing to having some idea what I was doing relatively quickly. Basically just got wrapped up in the sport and was just chasing that progression. So very quickly I went from not knowing what a triathlon was to loving it and doing multiple sessions a week.
So were you doing traditional swim squads from pre-dating all that, or running or anything?
I had a period where I always did swim training. we actually the family used to go to like swimming carnivals and stuff, and I was rubbish. I was terrible. I got smashed all the time. I was no good, too skinny, but I don't know. I obviously enjoyed it. I stuck at it. So I enjoyed it in some way, even though it was like maybe the 200-meter backstroke I could get a third in, or some obscure event that no one wanted to do. But I had a decent pace of swimming, and as a kid I was good at cross country without training for it. So I guess I had a little bit of natural talent maybe for running, but not to any great success or anything. Like I would probably do well at school and the next level. And then if I did go through to state, I'd get smoked down there pretty much.
Yeah. So talk to us about your first road bike. Like what era are we talking here? We talking?
Yeah, there's a classic photo of me on this road bike in the absolute worst position you've ever seen. Like I got the TT bars on. I'm so upright. It's shocking. But it was a Malvern Star Poppy or something I think it was called. I think we paid $300 or $400 for it back then. It would have had Tiagra or worse, I'm pretty sure. But
were the shifters on the downshoot?
Yeah, no, I had gears. I had gears on the top. Like, it wasn't old. It was like relatively new. This was maybe like 2012, so it was probably like a 2009 model or something. A few years old, but not spec'd up or anything. But I mean, to me, coming off a mountain bike, it's like, oh, this is
a rocket ship.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, pretty wild to see some of the bikes getting around nowadays. The technology is really different.
Yeah, mate, you can spend as much money as you want these days. It's limitless.
Yeah. And so you started with Pete, and was all schools triathlon and super sprint runaway bay? Was that all a thing back then?
Yeah. So I went to school in Terranora, Lindisfarne in New South Wales. So I was in a sort of a weird situation because we live northern New South Wales. I was part of the Tri-Queensland development squad, but then I did all schools down in Penrith. So I sort of had a foot in both camps. So I think I'd probably been doing the sport properly for maybe 4 to 6 months before I did my first all schools down in Penrith. And I think I came 13th there, rings a bell. So I didn't make it to nationals or anything. That would have been in year 11 of school. But like for me, like 13th in the state was like, oh my God, that's insanely good from what anything else I'd done before. So I think when you get that taste of success in your youth as well, you want to chase that as well, going from being really mediocre at something to having some better results. Yeah,
maybe a bit of a glimmer of something.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, which is a really interesting point. Some of the things I've learned through coaching journey and talking to athletes and that is that whilst, you might be trying to compete at high levels and things, it's always good to kind of find some wins in some way. So I guess, 13th was your win that gave you enough to kind of keep pursuing it.
Yeah, totally. 100%.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were part of a Triathlon Queensland development. What did that look like? What did you get anything? Did you do camps? What was the sort of structure?
Yeah, there was it was sort of time trial based to get in at that point in time.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what the standards were, but they were decent standards to make. The talent squad was the top level, and then there was the development squad. So I think anyone at that point in time could sort of register for the development squad, and then if you hit a certain 1K swim and 5K run, you can be eligible for the talent squad. Yeah. And I think if you made the talent squad, you might have got free camps and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of support around it. Nothing financial, as in here's some cash, but a bit of support from the state network, which helps obviously when you're in a super expensive sport like tri. Yeah.
And any names in that squad that are sort of around nowadays or took triathlon further that you can call back?
Well, Hauser was a couple of years younger, but he was sort of starting to come through at that time. Luke William was around, in and out a bit. Kai Wilde as well was a part of that sort of era. And then there's some guys that aren't doing the sport anymore that were really good back a few years ago, like Dan Coleman and Calvin Quirk, Matt Roberts, those sort of guys, Christian Wilson. There was a really strong age group sort of coming through Queensland at that point in time.
Yeah. So, yeah, some of those names you're throwing around there probably is around about when I started to tip my nose into, I guess, that performance space. So
2013, 2014-ish, I reckon.
Yeah, starting to ring more of a bell for me.
Yeah,
which is interesting. Yeah, you see the people come in and go out, and
always a big turnover. Hey.
Yeah. So with your training around that time, were you doing just weekly sessions, or were you on like a training peaks plan, or did you have any plan as such, like structure in that sort of regard?
Yeah, so that whole period I was coached by Pete McKenzie. It wasn't training peaks as such. It was like a weekly email. I'd have what I do Monday to Sunday laid out in a program sort of format. Sort of a bit prior to training peaks, I guess, but it was a similar thing. It just, you didn't log your data. So I had all my sessions. I knew what I was doing. I had a swim squad up at Kingy Pool that I would swim at 3 or 4 mornings a week.
Yeah.
And I did some I think 2 run sessions a week with Brian Chapman, the Border Strike group. So went through there, as a lot of athletes have as well. So basically, I did my triathlon. I didn't have a triathlon squad. I had a swim squad, a running group.
Yeah.
And I did like my riding by myself and with a few like local guys around King.
Yeah. Cool. So it sounds like you, I guess, started, for lack of a better word, a specialist triathlon program from about 17, 16?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. That was my main focus. Yes, 17, I think.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And okay, so you I'm assuming you did year 12. Did you have ambitions on going to university or working or trades, or what was that sort of situation look like?
Yeah, so I finished school, went to uni, had a crack at exercise science, but I think a lot of kids that do sport do exercise science, and for me, I didn't enjoy it at all. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. So, and it came to the point after a semester where, with my triathlon ambitions, it wasn't possible to do the amount of work I needed to fund myself to do triathlon. So I was like, well, uni's the one that has to go, because I want to do tri. That's a non-negotiable, and I need the money to get where I want to go. Yeah.
So you were so in that point in time you were working just casual job, few shifts a week, or?
Yeah, so straight out of school, I think I was working at the local bike shop in Kingy and at a fish and chip shop in Kingy as well. Probably 20, 25, I guess maybe 20 to 25 hours a week across the two.
Yeah, so pretty much part-time, and then doing, what was uni enrolled full-time?
Uni, I did start full-time, which was definitely not a good idea either. And then by the wayside very, very quick. That was if I had to miss homework for uni or training, you could guarantee the uni stuff was getting missed.
On the back burner. Yeah. And so you recognise that pretty quick. What kind of level were you racing at, training at that point in time? And you're saying you would choose triathlon over the other things.
Mm-hmm.
What was it in triathlon world that was your next thing you were working towards?
Yeah, so I think, this is, as I finished school, I'm going into my last year as a junior.
Yeah.
At that point in time, in my last year at juniors, I reckon I was definitely consistent top 10 in Australia, but I wasn't one of the best. I think I probably came 7th or 8th at a lot of the junior races, maybe a top 5 at a super sprint weekend or something like that.
Yeah.
So I guess I had like a glimpse of maybe having a bit of ability in the sport and having something that I can take onwards. But yeah, I think the big focus, well, the big effort was for me to make the National Talent Academy, which was the top program in Australia at the time. So that was my big goal for that first year out of school.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. The NTA, we do hear that every now and then, depending, if you talk to coaches and parents and athletes from that period. And I guess if what my sort of knowledge of the sport and what I've seen and that really seems to be a fond memory for people.
Yeah.
And something they thought worked. So for many people who watch this, what was NTA? What did it look like? What was your commitment to it as an athlete and all that sort of thing?
So the first thing I remembered about wanting to get in the NTA was when you go to the national races, everyone would be in their state suits. Then you have the NTA guys in the green and gold. And I was like, right. That's a dream to have that green and gold suit. So that was my first thing that put an aspiration on it, was to get the green and gold suit. But basically, if you could make the NTA, you would get some like financial support to a few races. They did have a program that they ran with Giant, where you got a Giant TCR. You got a bike with Dura-Ace and stuff. So that was awesome. I made it literally a month after that partnership stopped. So I was like, yep, no bike for me. But yeah, typical.
On the Melbourne Star.
Yeah, exactly. So there was a lot of perks to it, and you got every year there'd be at least one camp where the whole NTA cohort came together with like the NTA coaches who are employed purely to look after the NTA. It was a really, really good program. And
where did those coaches come from? Were they paid full time? Did they just get paid, or you probably might not even know?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean,
did they have their own squads throughout the rest of the year and then just got pulled in NTA times?
I feel like it was almost a full-time gig. When I first started, it was Kieran Barry was my head, being from New South Wales. Then I think Dan Atkins was one at some point. Chris Lang had something to do with it at a point. Pete Robertson.
I think Josh White had something to do with it.
Josh White, I think, was involved towards the end as well. So there's a lot of good coaches, and a lot of people come through the system and sort of impart their knowledge on it at some point.
Yeah, nice. And like, how long were those camps that you did? Were they just weekends? Were they a week during the holidays?
They were like a week to 10 days, I think, from memory. On the Gold Coast a lot of the time. And it was really cool because you'd come together with the first one I did. It was like Jake Birtwistle, Matt Baker at the time were there. Like a lot of the guys that were a couple of years older than me that I sort of looked at like they were incredibly good athletes, which they were at the time. They were absolutely killing it. So
Jake would have been flying with his running back then.
Yeah, 100%. Like he looked like a man, and I was still a scrawny little kid. So it was cool to get exposed to that and the coaches and their knowledge. And I remember I was really slow to develop on the bike in particular. And I remember we did one ride where we went up Springbrook, up the steep side, and it was like a race up the hill. And I was last by a long way. I think all the girls beat me as well. I got to the top, clipped out, and Craig Redmond, who was the head of the program at the time, he was like, "Okay, Brando, you better start descending. I'll give the guys a 5 minute delay."
It's always the hard thing if you're the slow one on a ride that has hills, and everyone's had a rest up there for a few minutes, and then you get there and it's like, all right, time to go.
Off you go, mate. Yeah. So there's a few core memories burned in, but a good program.
And so what were the requirements to get in that program?
Yep. So by the time I made it, from my first camp, I was quite young. That one I was talking about on the bike, I was probably 17 at that point. I don't think I made it until I was 19. So basically what they had was this table of the world's best and their times over 1K swim and 5K run, which was taken from the sprint distance world champs, I think. And you had to be within like the 93rd percentile or something of that.
Yeah.
So for me, I had to hit 11:59 for a K swim and 14:59 for a 5K run. And I had a few cracks at it, and I swam a 12:01 and I ran a 15:01. And I think they took a bit of pity on me, and they're like, "Come on, let him in." So eventually they're like, "Close enough. Just come on, you've made it." So so I did get there eventually. But yeah, it was a pretty high standard at the time.
And how were you 19? Did you say at that point?
I think I would have just been coming out of juniors.
Okay, so you've had to basically, well, you still have to at that point, but fend for yourself from finishing high school for sounds like about a year and a half.
Yeah.
That point. Yeah.
That sounds right.
And obviously NTA is not going to pay enough for you to stop the fish and chips and the bike shop.
No, far from it. There was still no like money in that sense. It was funding to go towards certain trips and camps and stuff, but it's not like they're paying you a salary or anything. No. Yeah.
And I actually went down memory lane last week. If you go to Facebook, our NTA Facebook page is still there.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah.
Obviously back a while, so you can sort of see who was around and what. Yeah, it seems like there was a lot of Asian race tours, a little bit of Europe stuff, maybe camps. Where did you get on
the worlds and stuff? I think they did a few camps like that as well.
Yeah, and did you get on any of those trips or?
I did a Asia trip. I did Osaka and Singapore in 2016, my first year as an under 23, but that was the only one I did.
Yeah. And did you go to, we're probably starting to step forward now, did you go to junior world champs or under 23 world champs? Yeah, it sounds like you were, we're at the point now where you would have been just eligible for under 23 world champs.
Yeah. So no, I never made junior world champs. Didn't get there.
Yeah.
My first year of under 23s, I didn't make that either. Then the first under 23 world champs I qualified for was Rotterdam in 2017.
Yeah. So that was what, your second year of eligibility for that?
Yeah, second of 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that go? What was your experience? What was your placings?
Yeah, it was a big step up, of course. It's a world champs. And Rotterdam was pretty extreme weather-wise. It was really cold. I think the water was like 13 or 14 degrees. It was it was pretty grim. Like the days, I think the day after the weather was even worse. It was pouring rain. But for our race, it was dry. It was by far the most technical course I've ever done on the bike. There was hundreds of corners. So I swam really well. I was up probably out of the top 10, I reckon, out of the water. I had a good swim, made the front group, rode with the front group for about 20 Ks and then got popped on a corner. I was just sort of yo-yoing the whole time. And eventually the elastic band broke and I think I had to ride a whole lap solo, so probably 5K solo.
Yeah.
Before I was caught by the second pack. And then roll around with the second pack and ran okay. I think I came 33rd, I think, at my first under 23 Worlds, which probably wasn't what I was hoping for, but I really had no clue what I was capable of at that level anyway.
Yeah. So it's interesting hearing all this because so far there doesn't really appear to be a big a turning point or a breakthrough. It's not like you've won a junior worlds or podiumed at something big. So I guess what kept you going? Was it being part of the NTA and having something to look forward to, or was there something else, or you just loved it?
I just loved it, to be honest. I just enjoyed every session so much that it's like, why would I ever even consider stopping? I feel like, when you really enjoy what you do, it doesn't matter if I was coming 40th at races. Like I'll probably still enjoy it. Be a bit harder to enjoy it, but I'd still enjoy the training and stuff. So
Yeah.
There was never a moment where I thought this isn't what I want to do anymore, and there still hasn't been to this day. So
Yeah.
I just really enjoy it and have fun doing what I do.
Yeah. You know those memes you see with the X-ray of the chest and there's the dog in there?
Yeah.
Sounds like that's a part of if we were to X-ray you, there's that dog in there.
Yeah, 100%. So
seems to be seems to be a common theme with a lot of pros who have been around a while.
100%. Yeah, it's a very tough sport with can be very little reward at times. So if you don't have that intrinsic belief and want to do it, like it will get very tough, I think, very quickly.
Yeah, sounds like it. Oh, definitely. Yeah, sounds like it. Right. So, I mean, give us like, where does the rock finally crack and crumble, and you realize, right, I'm actually pretty good at this. Like, I can take this to the world.
Yeah. That NTA trip that I was talking about, that was in 2016. So that was a year before I made under 23 Worlds. I was training with Pete. I'd actually moved up to the Sunshine Coast to live with Pete. He took me into his home, which I was very grateful for. Was training with him, and I was training by myself was the only thing. So no other high performance athletes with me. There was age groupers around and some younger kids, but I didn't have that network of elites with me to sort of benchmark. So then I went over to that trip in Osaka and Singapore, and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to win these races. Like, I've been training the best I ever have. I'll probably win. I'll come top 5. I'll make some money. I'll be fine.
Yeah.
I think I came 40th in the first race and 10th or 11th in the second one. Like, I got absolutely smoked, and I was like, okay, what I'm doing, it's not where I want to be. It's not good enough at this point in time. So I had to make a tough decision and make a change, and that was to join Dan Atkins' crew on the Gold Coast, which was all the guys that went on that NTA trip, and have a high performance environment around me all the time. I felt like that was what I needed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I made that decision, had the difficult conversations, and turned my attention to moving back home to Kingscliff, training with Dan on the Gold Coast, and being immersed in that group. And I feel like that sort of level of professionalism and dedication sort of was a bit of a turning point for me. And yeah, from there I just sort of continually set the bar a bit higher and higher for myself.
Yeah. I think that's it's a hard thing, regardless of you doing sport or you're in a workplace or whatever. But when you've been somewhere for a while and people have obviously invested time in you and that sort of thing, but I think there probably wouldn't be a coach or athlete out there who hasn't had to have a difficult conversation and things aren't working, or there's just a difference of opinion, or maybe the coach doesn't have the time to invest in that space and to help take you forward. So if you and we always give respect to those who help us get to those points. But if you had to offer any advice to kids, or when I say kids, teenagers or people maybe in that space nowadays, what's kind of the way to go about it? Or because some people could get stuck because it is a hard decision to make, and it requires a bit of a mature mindset to bring up those conversations, and to have those conversations, you ideally want them to go well, where there's no bad blood or anything like that. That would be the ultimate case, but sometimes it's not possible. What's some advice you could give to people who might? I think some people out there realize they're in those positions, but it's deep in the back of the head, and it takes a long time to come to the forefront for some people. And maybe it comes through too late where they should have made that decision a lot earlier. Or maybe they've got those thoughts, but there could be options where they currently are to keep helping them develop. What's your sort of advice?
Yeah, look, I think obviously everyone's situation's different, and I'm no expert, but in my opinion, like for me, I started to find that I was looking elsewhere, like I'd had 100% belief in everything that I was doing up to a certain point. And then I think once you find that you are looking around, trying to find where the grass is greener, like there is probably that underlying thing going on where you have lost a little bit of belief or a little bit of faith in what you're doing. I think you just need to be honest with yourself and honest with your coach around what you're feeling. Because a lot of times the relationship doesn't necessarily have to end with your current coach. It might need to evolve in some respect. You might need exposure to higher level running, so finding a running group but still working with your current coach, or exposure to better cycling or swimming, whatever it is. But I think just being open and upfront, which is something that I did struggle with because it's a daunting conversation. I was petrified before having that conversation.
Did you go into it by yourself, or did you have?
Yeah, I went in by myself. So it was really nerve-wracking when someone's put so much time and effort into you to say, "See you later, that's it." It's a pretty hard thing to go through on both sides, for both the coach and the athlete.
For sure.
So I think just being honest and sticking with your gut, I think, as well, because you want to ultimately, we train so many hours that if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you're not wanting to do it, you're not probably going to progress. So I think it's about having a fun, like healthy environment that you want to go to and want to train and want to push yourself, and at the end you can have a laugh with your mates, like get the work done but enjoy it and be in
I've got to hide it with enjoyability.
Exactly.
No, that's all really good. I love it. All right, so I guess at some point soon you're getting proper support. You've made a change in environment. You're on the Gold Coast. Part of the Patreon, and that is about helping athletes and parents and even coaches understand the options that are out there to keep people progressing. Because from what I thought I knew years ago was it seemed like categorization or being basically picked up by Triathlon Australia at the time was the next step. And if you didn't achieve that step, then it was kind of like, oh, well, that's it for me. What was that your next step? You got categorized, or how did that play out?
Yeah, so I was actually categorized as a junior, I think.
Right.
Sort of started 2016, I think I got categorized. Then I very quickly lost categorization at the end of 2016.
All right.
I can't remember why. I remember I'd broken my wrist. I wasn't racing at that point in time, I think. So I lost it briefly there. But then I had some better results and qualified for under 23 Worlds. So it was only a 6-month lag where I wasn't categorized, and then I was back on categorization.
Yeah. And so, okay, for the athletes sitting at home going, right, I'm going to get categorized. I'm going to start getting paid as an athlete. Things are going to be easy. I can train full time and recover heaps and be in my Normatex for 2 hours a day and watching TV, and everything's going to be good. What's the realities of getting categorized as a new athlete? And then obviously you've been categorized for a while. How does that change, or what does it sort of look like throughout your time?
Yeah, so if you're expecting to get categorized and get thousands of dollars and resources thrown at you, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. I think the resources and the staff that have been put in place have been really helpful around dietitians, strength and conditioning, all that sort of stuff. is really good. Once you categorize, you have access to that, which is really helpful as a young developing athlete. But from an actual financial point of view, it's not until you get to the sort of higher levels where you're actually getting much significant support, I would say, because obviously Triathlon Australia has a finite budget. It's not limitless. They can't throw thousands of dollars at every athlete.
One college football budget.
Yeah, if only, hey, if only. So, so for me, I think it started with might have been support to a few domestic races, maybe one international race, and you got the green and gold sort of training kit, and I had access to training facilities and gym coaching and stuff like that. And then it sort of develops as you move through the system. You can start being more well supported with accommodation while you're overseas, flights, stuff like that. It can sort of unravel to a point where you actually get paid a little bit from the AIS as well.
Yeah. So are you still working? Is your work situation the same? Did that change? Did you do less work?
So I worked until mid 2020. Once I moved back to the Gold Coast, I started working for my dad, who worked at a bricklaying company. So I was in the warehouse stacking scaffolding and forklifts and all sorts of stuff in like summer in Australia I did that for like 2.5, 3 years. It sucked, but I always would tell myself like, oh, no one else is doing this. This is all extra training. Like, and in a sense it was mental training, but I had to believe that to be able to do it, So, it was tough doing that, going from training from sort of maybe 6 till 9 or whatever it was, and then going straight to work because I didn't want to drive back to Kingscliff, straight to work for 3 or 4 hours. And don't get me wrong, I didn't work too hard. That's never been an issue. But
for warehouse operators and businesses out there, don't hire triathletes.
No, definitely not. We're taking the easy option. That's for sure. But yeah, it was a hard period going to training in the morning, working those 3 or 4 hours in the middle of the day, and then training again in the afternoon. But it forced me to be very organized and very alert around my nutrition and stuff, because I would leave home at 5:30 in the morning and get home at 4 o'clock. So yeah, it forced me to be very smart in that way.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting close now to, I guess, elite Brando. When did things actually sort of be more like what you thought an elite athlete lifestyle would be like? Where you've got time during the day to recover properly and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'd say probably like the start of 2019 is where I started to get some real traction with my results and stuff. Like, I was starting to make a little bit of prize money, doing okay. I'd done a French GP in 2018 and gotten signed to a better team in 2019 that was going to pay me more money. So I was starting to come to a place where I was actually making a little bit of money from the sport, not getting rich, but I was making enough that I was like, okay, I'm progressing year on year, and moving forward. And 2018, I came 12th at under 23 World. So I went from 33rd to 12th, and I was like, okay, that's a good progression. I got one more year. I was sort of shifting my focus to trying to podium at under 23 Worlds, and I got my first World Cup podium in Mooloolaba. So things were starting to come together in 2019. I felt like I was becoming a more complete athlete. I didn't have a big weakness, as big a weakness on the bike. It still wasn't to the level it should have been at, but it was getting there. And my swim and run were competitive. So yeah, I think 2018 I sort of progressed my results throughout the year, had some good ones, had some stinkers, as we always do in tri. And then 2019, I started to be a bit more consistent and have some really good results mixed in there as well.
Yeah. So this is tough, hey? You're listening to that timeline. 2019, things are happening now, and then good old COVID comes along.
Yeah.
And I imagine you were in Australia, lockdown, unlockdown, and all that. And then how did things sort of roughly happen through there, and then on the other side?
Yeah. Well, I finished 2019 with a 5th at under 23 Worlds, and then so I didn't quite hit my goal of getting the podium, but I was still relatively happy. I went into the race ranked number 1, so it always sucks to be ranked number 1 and not on the podium, but still I was pretty content with that. It was a good race, and then I think I had a few little niggles to round out the year and sort of didn't finish the year very well, unfortunately. And then 2020 came around quick, and as you said, it was a shambolic year. There was no one really knew what was going on. I raced Devonport and Mooloolaba to start the year, and neither of those races were great. I wasn't firing the way I wanted to be, and then basically the whole world shut down for the best part of 18 months, really.
I know, bit crazy. What was your general philosophy approach through that time? Because some people took big breaks, some people kind of kept training and gave themselves challenges to do and that sort of thing. What was your general approach to that time?
I kept training pretty normally the whole sort of period. I remember I was swimming in Kingy Creek 4 times, doing a heap of Zwift races and stuff, and running pretty normally. So I kept pretty busy throughout the whole lockdown period. I think it was sort of maybe 4 or 5 months were the worst of it in Kingscliff where I was. But I kept pretty busy through that whole period because, as I said, I just enjoy training and enjoy triathlon. So I was happy to keep tracking along with things.
Yeah, no, nice. That sounds good. So I guess we're getting towards today. You come out of, well, you're sort of still in lockdown and everything, and you have another change in training, coaching environments. Talk to us a little bit about that period.
Yep. So 2021 was actually a pretty positive year for me. Straight out of COVID, I had some good results. I got offered to go to Tokyo as a reserve. I think I was 2nd or 3rd pick, but I decided to go and sit in a hotel for the Tokyo Olympics, which was a weird experience, but it was cool nonetheless. And then from there, I went over and raced a couple of World Series. I came 13th at the grand final, which was my best result by far to date. And then had a bit of a block in Europe and finished the season in Abu Dhabi, where I had a bad race. I had nothing left at the end of the year. And then sort of all the news started unfolding about Joel Filiol coming on as a TA coach. And I was like, okay, well, I am doing well where I am. There's no denying that I am improving, but this is at this point in time, Joel's regarded as the best coach in the world, and his squad is the best squad in the world. And I was like, if there's a chance that I can go and be a part of that 100%, I'm gonna take that opportunity and run with it. So that's what I did. I had the tough conversation with Dan, and started training with Joel, and it was a very different style of training to what I was used to. But I had some great exposure to some of the best athletes in the world, in Vincent Louis and Vasco Velasco, Yella Games, all these guys that are absolutely world class. And training with them day in, day out was definitely a eye-opening experience. And I'm very, very glad that I did it, even though it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to results-wise, and it all sort of blew apart in the end as well. But it was an opportunity that at the time was too good not to take.
Yeah. And were you based in Spain for most of the year during that period? And then, because that always seems to be a really hard challenge for Australian athletes. We have to travel a long way to get to the big races and that. What was that sort of a hard thing to deal with? That you think that might have affected things?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. That was 2022 and 2023 spent a lot of time in Europe, based between Girona and Font-Romeu, which was really cool at first. Like it's awesome traveling the world and all these perks that you do get with triathlon, but at the same time, nowhere is quite like home. I was very lucky in the sense that Kira, my partner, travels with me the majority of the time. So those 2 years, I was really lucky to have her with me. Makes things a lot easier having your partner with you overseas. So in that regard, I was a lot better off than a lot of other people are when they travel overseas. But still, it's a long year away from home,
Yeah, it's still not quite like home, like you said.
No, definitely not. Still miss Australia.
Yeah. And so you're back now in Australia. Changed back to training with Atkins on the Gold Coast. What's like that sort of last period there? Is there anything notable to round out that period? There seems to be kind of like what you mentioned there, a bit of a blow up with things. What's the, when you've been categorized and you've kind of been in the NTA and that sort of thing, do you notice any significant changes, like when there were good periods or where things felt smooth, and then when there was periods where it was all a bit like going over speed bumps all the time, and you might have been distracted, or periods where you could really focus on being an athlete, or has it all been pretty good as far as being able to focus on being an athlete? Because from other perspectives, there's obviously been changes in structures and things like that. Was there a period of time where you thought that seemed to be the way to do things, or that worked much better?
I think from an athlete's perspective, you sort of just want consistency and continuity, and that's something that we definitely haven't really had over the last few years. There's been a few performance directors, general managers, whatever you want to call them. The staff turnover has just been really big inside of TA, and both like from TA and from the like academies of sport, like QAS, who I work with. There's been a lot of turnover in staff. So I think just when things are smooth and consistent, you know who you go to for this, for that. I think that's generally when things operate the best, is when everyone knows their roles and just does what they're supposed to do, sort of thing. Makes your life a lot easier.
Yeah, it sounds kind of boring with training. We always talk about consistency, hey? But
but sometimes it's the big one.
Yeah. So now you're back on the coast. That's probably been about a year or so now since that sort of era. I see sometimes when I'm down on the Gold Coast previously, and online now, you're dipping your toes into a bit of coaching, and we were talking before you're finishing off one of your coaching courses. How did that all sort of come about? When did you sort of go, I wouldn't mind getting a piece of that?
Yeah, so me and Kai Wild, actually, just over a year ago, we were sitting around at home and we were like, we need a bit more like money. So we're like, okay, let's start a coaching business. And in this one morning, we concocted a whole thing, launched an Instagram, launched everything without knowing what we were doing. And then thankfully, Teresa Tika from T-Rex reached out to us and was like, hey guys, like you could have a bit of a pathway in coaching, but what you're doing without any knowledge is probably not the right way to do it. So we went and did our foundation course, did all that stuff. And now we're working with T-Rex's junior development squad. And yeah, it's been awesome. Hey, I really enjoy it. It's so good. Yeah. Working with the kids, like they're all progressing so quick. Yeah, it's just awesome. I love seeing them improving and meeting their goals and stuff. It's really cool to be able to hopefully have a small part in their progression through the sport. Super cool.
And I think that's, I think it's awesome that you're doing that, like starting off with the younger ones. I do remember way back, Atkins told me, this is probably over 10 years ago, a comment he made was, if you can coach juniors or kids, you can coach elites. Yeah. And it sounds really funny because, they seem, opposite apart, but that there really is a link there. Obviously, without putting words into your mouth, you might be able to fill us in, what's kind of next for Brandon. I imagine coaching in the future, having that under your belt and those experiences, if you were going to go further with the coaching, I think it's really good to see that, rather than what you do see a lot around all sports, where you do get some former elites or professionals or whatever, they kind of get parachuted into, I guess, high performance coaching roles a bit too early sometimes. Without kind of cutting their teeth at those earlier levels. What's happening next for Brandon in next, obviously the Paris cycle is done. Where are you at now with things?
So for me, I still have dreams to go to the Olympics. I've been a reserve twice, and that doesn't quite hit the same. So
Paris and Tokyo reserve.
Paris and Tokyo reserve. So I've watched from the sidelines a couple of times. Definitely still want to get there. So I'm still all LA. In on trying to make LA. That's my big goal for the next 4 years, is get myself to the point where I'm a good enough athlete to make it and compete, and not just make it, but hopefully do all right as well. So that's a big overarching goal, but in the meantime, just continuing to improve as an athlete and pick my races and perform is the goal.
So that's that. I was sort of wondering, and it's good to hear that you're still got that passion and motivation. From what we've been talking about, it doesn't sound like that's ever gonna go away. What's gonna be, to make that next step to an Olympic team? We obviously know it's a very hard thing to do, and seeing what athletes had to go through last year for Paris, on top of a regular season, and obviously selections and things like that are tough to deal with as well. What's the approach? What's the thing? Is there a thing you can put your thumb on to say that's what I need to really do? What's it sort of going to take?
I think at this stage, over the next 2 years, it's really about progressing myself as an athlete, closing my gaps to the front of the race, which I have gaps in swim, bike, and run. Trying to become a more well-rounded athlete, a stronger athlete, so that when that Olympic qualification window opens again, I can hopefully try and tick the box for automatic selection, whatever that ends up being, which we won't know for quite some time. But for now, it's just about being the best I can be, and being ready that when LA rolls around, because it will come around quick. Because
3 years now.
They go quicker than you think. It's just about progressing across each season and trying to work my way into that sort of top 10 in the world.
Nice to hear. Actually, that's a good segue to a question I was asked in a survey a little while back, was what's the big difference between an elite athlete and a junior athlete? Obviously, capability is obvious, but what's some of the big differences there, you reckon?
I think honestly there's probably not a lot from your elite junior to your elite. It's probably the training volume and the way that you train is probably the biggest things, because I think a lot of juniors, broadly speaking, are doing a lot of intensity work.
Mm.
Whereas I think most juniors would probably be shocked to find out how easy a lot of elite athletes training is. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest noticeable one is the total volume. Like, you might be training as an elite 25 to 30 hours a week as opposed to 10 to 15 as a junior, but probably 80% of that is going to be easy aerobic conditioning work. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of juniors, it's almost 80% intensity and 20% aerobic. So that's probably the biggest shift that you would come across going from that elite junior to elite space.
And I think it'd be good to where possible educate parents on that as well, because obviously the kids want some results and they want to see something, which obviously lends them to want to go hard, but trying to educate them on the realities and the long-term
100%, because I mean, at the end of the day, probably no one's going to know who won the junior world champs in 2026, but I bet they'll know who the elite world champion is in 2032. That's when you want to be at your best as an athlete, is when it counts. And I know all these little milestones away, school states, super sprint weekend, we all think it's the Olympics. Every time I used to think of super sprint weekend, this is the biggest thing in the world. And you look back and you go, okay, it was important then, but at the end of the day, it's not going to define who I am as an athlete or as a person. Like, they're just stepping stones along your journey.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's a really good message. I actually had one question come through from, probably, I won't mention their names, I don't want to embarrass them, but there's a JDS member, and one of their questions they wanted to ask was, who's your favorite JDS?
I can't do it. Coaches can't play favorites. My favorite's whoever does the best at each session.
Whoever buys you the best Christmas gift.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure they'll fess up at the next training session.
I'll check in with them this afternoon. See who sent through the dodgy question.
No, that's awesome, mate. I guess we can probably come to a wrap, but going back over everything, you've been in the system, you've worked your backside off in the early stages, working, training, a bit of study for a number of years. You've moved training environments a couple of times. You've been right through it all, a couple of Olympic cycles there as a reserve. You've been to Commonwealth Games. If you could help give athletes who are aspiring to that sort of elite lifestyle, what's the best piece of advice you could give them today?
I reckon you just need to stay. It's a boring message, but you need to stay consistent and stay the course. Because as I said, I wasn't the best junior. There was 6, 7, 8 guys that were way better than me as a junior. And I think in this sport, we're lucky that work ethic shines through at the end of the day. And if you're willing to be consistent, work hard, do as many of the little things right as you can, you will eventually get rewarded. It may not be instant, it may take a while. I'm still waiting to get where I want to get, but I have faith that it's possible in this sport, and staying the course, being consistent day in, day out, it does reward you eventually. Yeah,
nice one, mate. Good way to finish. We'll have to get some Brando 28 shirts made up. And I'm sure we're all behind you to get on the plane over there.
Yeah, beautiful. Appreciate it, mate.
Awesome, mate. Thanks for the chat. Look forward to seeing what the next 4 years has in store with you.
Makes 2 of us, mate. Cheers.
Cheers.